Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. This one is going to be short because I want to get to one on Sanders, and that one is probably going to be next. Shout out to the people at Fault Lines for having me on. The show was awesome. I think everyone had a good time. I definitely had a good time. I had the opportunity to talk to Garland afterwards, and we ended up in a conversation on Sanders that I wanted to talk about. That's going to be next. So I'm going to go through this one relatively quickly. Donald Trump exclaimed at one point that he was considering bringing the troops home. Now, you know, Donald Trump says things, and I don't necessarily know if Donald Trump meant I'm bringing these troops home right now, but he raised the idea that he would potentially bring the troops home from North Korea. Those troops have been there for God knows how long. My wife has family that served over there. I'm not mad at it. Why would I be mad at that? I think we should bring those troops home, especially if you can have some kind of reconciliation process between the South and the North. Apparently, however, Democrats are not on board with this. And while they completely abdicated all responsibility for the standpoint of war, they now want to take responsibility for peace and want to essentially attack the very foundations of the democratic process and the democratic institution of our country itself in order to attack Donald Trump. What do we mean by that? That's a pretty big statement. That's pretty grand. What do you mean? What do you mean? Tammy Duckworth is trying to add a feature to the National Defense Authorization Act that would allow the Department of Defense to get a say-so in whether or not Trump can bring those troops home. And let me just read it because I want to get it right before I tear into this. Democratic senators moved to halt potential U.S. troops withdrawal from South Korea. A pair of Democratic senators on Wednesday introduced an amendment to annual defense policy bill that would stop President Trump from withdrawing U.S. forces from South Korea without the Pentagon's input. The amendment would help prevent the president from making a rash decision about troop reductions on the Korean Peninsula that negatively impacts our national security, Senator Tammy Duckworth and Chris Murphy said in a joint statement. Introduced for the fiscal 2019 National Defense Authorization Act, an already ghastly act in the first place, the provision would stop a withdrawal unless the United States Secretary of Defense certifies it is within our national security interests and would not significantly undermine the security of our allies in the region. One of the bedrocks of our country has to do with civilian control of the military. It is an extraordinarily important bedrock. We don't necessarily want somebody who looks at the world from the standpoint of a hammer and a nail to the entire world, or to a hammer, the entire world looks like a nail. What is the perspective of somebody who's in the military? And is it possible that their perspective looks at the world through the lens of war and peace, which is one of the reasons why you want the president to be above that and take advice, but not necessarily be hamstrung by the military? It's their choice. It's the president's prerogative. Now, I'm bothered by this because, and again, I feel like I'm continuously put in these positions where I have to defend Trump because of something ghastly and stupid that the Democrats are doing. If this was Obama, they would be perfectly okay with this. When Obama was trying to liberate Cuba and trying to open it up, not liberate, but when he was trying to open up Cuba, the Republicans did the exact same thing. We've had that war for the past 50, 60 years. We've had those troops at the border for God knows how long. Just because something has been does not necessarily mean that something needs to continue to be. Is there a possibility of making reconciliation in a peace process? And the idea that you are putting the Department of Defense, or at the very least, the Secretary of Defense, essentially some military stooge, at the head of that decision is problematic. That is a president's prerogative. I don't like Trump. I think he's a reality show host. But I don't necessarily want to tear at the fabric of the country in order to go and attack Trump. What happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis? JFK is talking to his people. Essentially, the military that was in the room wanted to strike. They figured they had a military superiority, and they wanted to strike, understanding that they would lose part of the eastern seaboard. They understood that they would, east-west, one of them, but they understood that they were going to lose a large number of Americans, and they were willing to do it anyway. There's a reason why you don't put the military in charge of decisions like this. You put the president in charge of these decisions. And I understand Tammy Duckworth's concern that the president is somewhat of a lunatic, or the president is unhinged. All that, I get it. I don't care. I don't care. If there's a chance for a peace process, I would like the president to have the latitude to take the opportunity for a peace process. And again, the idea that you are letting military make the final determination on something that is a president's prerogative is terrifying. It's utterly terrifying. The lengths that the Democrats will go in order to kind of attack Trump, as opposed to dealing with the shit that matters. Deal with the stuff that matters. You have the worst face of the capitalistic system that you've ever had in that office. He is utterly grotesque in the way he goes about his affairs and the things that he says. And are you telling me that the only thing you can think to attack him on is either Russia or some stupid amendments like this? You're willing to literally put a knife in one of the bedrocks of this country, civilian control of the military. Because guess what? You lose civilian control of the military if you're saying that the military needs to be the determining factor in making a choice. It's the president's prerogative, and that should not necessarily be challenged, nor should it be impeached. I understand that you guys are Johnny-come-lately to wanting to have some say-so in military affairs. Hey, you want to have some say-so in military affairs? What about getting our troops out of Syria? What about saying that war is illegal? What about getting our troops out of Yemen and stopping helping Saudi Arabia murdering Yemenis? There's so many other things that you can focus your intentions on. This is nonsense. This is nonsense. I am not for a unilateral drawdown, so don't misunderstand me. I am not for this thing of let's just trust them and say fucking take. I am not for that at all. I am for somewhat of a peace process whereby both sides can show and earn trust. That's what I'm for. Like this idea that North Korea should get rid of its nuclear weapons is nonsense to me. Why? Why would anybody give up the ace in the hole that's kept them safe all of this time? Nobody should do it, nor should they be asked to do it right away, because there's no way that you can trust both parties. If you're trying to get some level of reconciliation, again, there has to be some level of de-escalation to get any level of reconciliation. No, I don't want the military being the decision maker in that process. Yes, give your advice. I want them to have that advice, but at the end of the day, regardless of whether I like Trump or not, there will be another president. And do I want that president hamstrung by the decisions of the military? And just one last point. I made this point when Obama was in office, and Obama was accruing powers in this spot, locking up Americans indefinitely, throwing away the key, putting troops on U.S. soil, and the band played on, and nobody had anything to say. This idea that anybody could be considered a terrorist didn't matter, didn't factor into the decision, because hey, after all, it's a Democrat that's in office, and they're just moderates. They can be trusted with that. And the question was raised, what happens when another Republican takes that office? And so arrogant they were, where they would say, we have a governing majority in perpetuity. We don't have to worry about that. From the people that bought you Libya, from the people that bought you the chaos in Syria, now you have Donald Trump, because they thought they were so goddamn smart. And now they have Trump with his hands on all of these tools that Obama gave him, that Bush gave him, and he is using those tools. Now here's the thing. This is a tool of peace, however. This particular one is actually a tool of peace. And Democrats have issues with it. Shame on Tammy Duckworth. Shame on you that you're willing to do this. Absolutely shame. Whether this is politics, or whether you have this warped idea that this is a good idea, shame on you. There's a reason why that's not necessarily the way things are. So, stop asking for civilian control of the military-industrial complex, Boris. Tell the Democrats peace is good, Christopher Suits. And by the way, by civilian control of the military, I don't mean private corporations. So don't misunderstand what I mean. I mean a person, not the military. Not the military. Skip rocks. Democrats only think of three things: me, power, and now. They don't care about anything else, whatever it takes to get their way. Trudy, I am a rebel with my green beans corn torns. I have no idea what that is. Trina be fine. Globalist corporations don't give a shit about individual countries. That includes the United States. They now want our taxpayer military per their own control. Skip pesky middleman presidents. Yeah. Louis Gato. Data lore, isn't that the line you're drawing arbitrarily? Why even draw the line at human flesh on the arbitrary basis you seem to propose? Data lore. What did data lore say? I need to see data lore. It's like I have to reference something that came to the top. Where's data lore? Data lore. Alright, I don't see data lore. And I kind of don't want to keep this one all that long. This isn't an attack on Trump. It's an attack on the Constitution. Yeah, that's my point. The U.S. fascist uniparty has been every excuse to attack the Constitution for decades. People give up this stuff and they think nobody would ever use it inappropriately. Why wouldn't they use it inappropriately? Look, here's the catch. If Obama was president of Syria, do you know what Obama would be doing right now? The exact same thing as Bashar al-Assad. If Donald Trump was head of North Korea, you know what Donald Trump would be doing? The exact same thing as a North Korean dictator. A lot of this doesn't necessarily boil down to the person. It boils down to the powers that are accrued in that office. And if they get those powers, they're going to use those powers at some point. What are the powers you're giving your government? And just think they're going to turn those powers on you. They've used those powers in multiple countries all around the world. And now these militarized police forces, these things with tanks, roaming through communities, not to mention being able to lock up an American citizen indefinitely just because you can call him or label him something that you don't particularly like. That guy is whatever. Lock him away because the rules that Obama put in place allow such a thing. They're assuming that they're going to use the term terrorists in the limited way that they tend to use it. Why are you assuming that? Why are you assuming that? Donald Trump has a protest, or people protest Donald Trump, and the media or whoever, somebody steps out of line, and Donald Trump tries to prosecute the people as terrorists because under that particular thing, they can grab somebody and throw that person in a black site. Can they do it? I don't know. Could they make the argument? Yes. And would the police follow suit? Yes. Would the military follow suit? Yes. Yes. All of them will follow suit, and all of them will fall in line if the president makes that request. You've given them ton of powers, and those powers can be turned on the American public at a whim. Bring those troops home. Bring those troops home. And again, not overnight. I don't have this. I'm not a peacenik in the sense of unilateral shutdown or strike down. No justice, no peace. I mean that. I mean that from a strategy standpoint. I mean that from a political standpoint. If you want to really get anything out of some negotiation, you got to take into account what the other person wants. Because if you're not taking into account their needs in an honest, earnest way, they're not going to be happy, and you're not ever going to get any real deal or any real agreement in this process. If Donald Trump is willing to budge, then they might also. As for this thing of North Korea not being trusted, we lied to them also, by the way. Bill Clinton was supposed to give them nuclear reactors. We did not do anything of the such. George Bush comes in, calls them a triad of destruction or trio of destruction, whatever the hell he made up. And at that point, the brakes were off. You've just called us a terrorist rogue state. We're under threat. We're under assault. George Bush has just threatened us with the United States military. What do you think they'll do? What do you think will happen if you made a gesture to try to bring down tensions and you actually tried to live up to the agreements that you make? Is it possible they may do the same? Is it possible that this may allow some level of reconciliation between the North and the South, seeing as the tensions have de-escalated? Democrats are standing in the way of progress. That's the truth of the matter. Somebody can debate. It's debatable, fair enough. But what I see is a president that seems more inclined, or at the very least teeter on this idea of bring these people home. It forces around him not necessarily being on board for it. Putting this into law, however, that's a fail. That's an absolute fail. Baltazar, breaking news. Aliens with the climate change reversal technology turned away by Democrats in 2019 because they don't want Trump to take credit. Right there. That's the other thing. That's the thing I forgot. They don't want him to get any wins. They don't want him to get any wins. I gotta be honest. It depends on the win. This is a win that I don't care who gets. I just care that it happens. It goes beyond politics. That's kind of the point I'm trying to make on some of this stuff. It used to be when things were outside of the borders, they were beyond politics. They were apolitical. If the president is engaging in something from the standpoint of foreign policy, apolitical. What's in the best interest of the country? Democrats have just dropped that. And Republicans have too. Both parties have dropped it. And that's extremely dangerous. I guess a duck isn't worth much. It's just change. Duckworth. Shame on Tammy Duckworth. Shame on Tammy. Let's see. Skip Rock. Democrat. Oh, yeah, I read that one. Let's see. Globalism sucks. Here's the thing. The problem isn't globalism per se. The problem is, people who... Look, if you have a class that... Well, let me ask it this way. Nancy Pelosi has $100 million in the bank. You understand that what Nancy Pelosi lives is fundamentally and completely different than the life that you lead. The pressures that are on her are different. The people are different. The services are different. Where she goes is different. What she eats is different. She lives a fundamentally different life. And yet, she's supposed to feel your pain and pass policies that are supposed to help a bottom class who she can never understand. Or at the very least, would not understand in a way sufficient where she could feel their pain in the way that she feel the pain of the capitalists or the dollar pressing in her wallet. I'm making a point to you that these people are out of touch. And the idea that they will be in touch, essentially the one who can fake it the best gets it. If you can fake sincerity, you got it made. That's what it boils down to. Globalism and capitalism are like enabling drug addict friends. That's hilarious. Jamal is a globalist shill. I don't know what that means. Sydney Athens. Trump picks up from the Obama administration. Look, here's the thing. Globalism in and of itself, the problem here is not necessarily trade with other people. The problem here is the people who are conducting the trades. Like, think of from the standpoint of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. A ghastly bill. And it's not even a trade deal. You can't even call it a trade deal. Ultimately, it's regulation that essentially supersedes your own laws. It's gaming the system in a way that goes under and attacks workers and attacks environmental laws. Trump, to some degree, was right when he said some of this stuff is about U.S. sovereignty. He wasn't fully wrong. Who's in the room? Who's in the room? And if the people in the room are of a particular class and of a particular demographic, why do you believe that they're going to work in your interests? They are not. The problem with globalism and trade is that the people who are doing the globalism and trade is not working in the interests of anybody else. They're working in their own interests. Now, you can make a point of saying, well, globalism, that is globalism. Fair enough. I'm just making a point that interacting with other people is not the problem. The problem is the people who are doing the interacting. When Obama said, trust me, I'm in the room for you, that's laughable. It's laughable. But that's all those trade deals for the most part. Whether you want to talk about NAFTA, whether you want to talk about TPP, whether you want a TISA is even worse. I mean, all of these things are ghastly bills. But you have to ask the question of who wrote them. You had enough wealth created to get rid of poverty 7 times over. 7 times over. You have people living on the streets, taking dumps on the streets in California. Why didn't they get rid of the poverty if they had the money to do it? Because they didn't care to do it. It wasn't their interest to do it any more than it would be their interest to work in your best interest when they're writing those trade deals. They're not. NAFTA should have gotten across of the people who were in the room as NAFTA was being written. That's kind of the point I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to make a distinction between trade as an absolute versus the people who are doing the trading and the way they're going about doing that trading, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. At least I'm trying to make sense. We had a bridge built underneath the land bridge to catch the falling debris from the bridge above. Oh, are you serious? Trina will be fine. Jeremy, once you get a taste of genocide, you just can't stop. Oh, Jesus Christ. Laura H., have you ever gone to the senator's office, met them? Yuck, plastic lying thugs. Yeah, I haven't. I'm trying to think, have I met any of my senators? I don't think I've met any of my senators. I've met politicians, but they always come across as plastic to me, if that makes sense. I assume everything is sentient. Everything, Marcia? My ink pen? This ink pen is not sentient, Martha. Come on. I guess I can't prove it. Fair enough. Yeah, I can't prove it, but I'm highly skeptical. Trickle down, trickle down. Yes, everything, Jamal. Even I'm not gonna go there. I'm not gonna say that. I'm not gonna be gross. Any entity will be able to essentially murder any one of us through any means, and there will be zero recourse for the average individual. Trina will be fine. Carl Jung thought so. Fair enough. Fox was caught writing paid stories for China. Really? I gotta check that one out. I gotta fact check you, buddy. Alright, guys. I have one more I want to do after this. About Sanders and the left with regards to Sanders. Because I have a question. What is the secondary recourse if Sanders is struck by lightning, gets hit by a bus, a falling toilet out of an airplane? What does Sanders or the acolytes of Sanders do? Second question. What if he's cheated again? What does Nina Turner, the Young Turks, Nomi, what I guess she's not at the podium of TYT now, but all of these advocates for the Democratic Party that's tried to board the ship and take over the ship, what do they do if that takes place? Do they still try to board the ship, or do they say, I'm done? Let's talk about it after this one. So, if you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. Of course, you can always support through Patreon. Let me make sure I haven't missed anybody. And good. How much is a duck worth? I love that one. That's hilarious. All right, guys. I'm going to end this one. I'm going to go to the next one. It'll be about 5 minutes or so. So, I'll see you shortly.